station. Always trust your gut.
Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne. You are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. Residue is not just another true crime podcast, but a necessary tool for those who want to understand the dangers lurking in the real world. You are listening to episode 55 titled Crossing Paths with Evil, the tragic story of Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena. I do need to offer the biggest trigger warning that you have ever heard for this episode. There will be graphic depictions of child sexual assault and murder. There will be discussions of suicide and triggering content related to sexual assault. I am giving the biggest trigger warning ever for this episode. I'm going to be quite honest with all of you. I had a really hard time finishing the book titled Pure Murder by Corey Mitchell. Throughout the episode, I will try to give you exact trigger warnings before I speak of something, but I just really want to emphasize listener discretion is advised. By the time you finish listening to this episode, you are going to be asking yourself, how can such evil exist in this world? This evil existing is even just beyond comprehension, but what is even more twisted is how do so many young boys, young teenagers come together, find each other, and all exist equally as evil? How do these paths cross at the exact moment when everything could have been different? Jennifer Ertman stayed. She didn't run. She could have. She had every reason to, but she stayed. She chose to stay by her best friend's side that night. And that choice speaks volumes. It's more than courage. It's something deeper, something that no one could ever take away from her on that night, June 24th, 1993. It was an ordinary evening when Joe Cantu and his wife Christina were at home trying to wind down. Joe Cantu, a high school dropout who had worked his way up to becoming a medical assistant, and his wife, Christina, a former gang member with a strong, protective nature. This couple had long learned to keep things calm and stable in their household. And little did they know that the night would take a very unexpected turn. A knock on the door broke the quiet. At first, neither of them was expecting anyone, and that alone set off this tinge of unease. When they opened the door, they were met by a confusing sight. At the door stood Joe Cantu's younger brother, Peter Cantu. He was with his three friends, Joe Medellin, Raul Villarreal, and Efrain Perez. These boys were not looking good. They looked disheveled and covered in blood. Their clothes were stained, and Joe Medellin had a scrape marring his neck. He was a mess. Christina is taken aback, doesn't know how to react, and is a little frightened by how these teenage boys look. And why are they at her house so late into the night, early into the morning? Christina took note of how the boys looked and notices that Efrain Perez has dried blood on his pants. These boys didn't even ask permission to enter the home. They just walked right in like it was their own house, no questions, no hesitation. Christina just stood there stunned. Her mind is racing as she's trying to piece together what had happened. She asks what happened, and she can feel the fear in her voice creeping up through her throat, but she doesn't want these boys to know that she's a little hesitant to have them in her home because these are not the nicest teenage boys that you're ever going to meet. The room just falls silent. The boys are exchanging looks, and then with an almost eerie calmness, Joe Medellin cracks a grin. He says to the group, "Let's just say that we had a lot of fun tonight." His words hang in the air, sending a chill down Christina's spine. All of the other boys start chuckling. So this is not going to put Christina at ease. Instead, she's getting really scared, really worried. Her heart's starting to pound. She's trying to rationalize this whole situation, thinking, okay, maybe these guys got into a bad fight, but still, they're acting like something isn't right. This is when Joe Cantu, noticing all this tension with his wife, he tries to get more clarity. He's asking again, what happened? Joe Medellin, still grinning like a fucking fool, repeats his earlier line, "We had a lot of fun." Christina's stomach is turning. Something's off. This moment feels like it's taking a lot longer than it actually took. Christina starts feeling like these boys are toying with her. Like, stop the shit, tell me what you're hiding. She knew whatever it was, it is not going to be good. Then, as if to make this situation even stranger, Joe Medellin casually drops another bombshell. He says, "Oh, you'll hear about this on the news." That was it. The hairs on Christina's back stand up, and at that moment, she realized she was most likely in the presence of 4 teenage boys who just did something terrible. She couldn't say for sure, but the blood on their clothes and their nonchalant attitude made her think maybe she was right. As if to make the situation even more bizarre, if you could, Joe Medellin then asked if he could take a bath in Joe and Christina's house. They don't know this person. This is Joe's younger brother's friend. This request leaves them completely dumbfounded, but what happens next was even worse. Raul, without warning, strips off his shirt and tosses it at Christina, a woman he had never met until this moment, and he says to her, "Get rid of this." She said that he said it to her like she was his servant. Christina is now utterly disgusted, takes the shirt and tosses it straight into the trash. She quickly walks outside and tries to dump the t-shirt into the trash bin, just needing to escape this house for a brief moment. But her husband, Joe, kind of in a daze, follows her outside without saying a word. He grabs the shirt from the trash can outside and he burns it right there in the front yard, lights it on fire. Back inside of the house, the unease thickened as Joe Cantu finally sits down in the living room with his wife. The men gather around. The teenagers gather around, not men. And Joe Medellin began to explain what had happened that night. As Joe Medellin detailed the events in an almost detached manner, it was clear that Christina was right. All along, these teenage boys had been involved in something much darker than she had imagined. The laughter and the, quote, fun they referred to wasn't just a fight. It was a night that had spiraled into violence. Evil violence. And now Christina knew she was caught up in something that she could not escape. The discovery of the bodies of 2 teenage girls shocked the community, sending ripples of fear and heartbreak through their families and friends. But for Christina, she knew that there was something that she was going to have to do. Christina is a hero in this story that I am about to tell you. Before we get to the events of June 24th, 1993, the events that occurred before these teenage boys showed up at Christina Cantu's house, I want to give you a little background information on everyone involved in this case. And we are going to start with Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena. Jennifer Ertman, born on August 15th, 1978, was a miracle baby and the only child of her parents, Randy and Sandra Ertman. Jennifer had a unique sense of humor. She had a laugh that could light up a room. She was sensitive, modest, and funny, an innocent, caring young girl who was still very much a child in her heart, even at age 14. Jennifer was never into boys and wasn't interested in showing off her body. She preferred to wear baggy clothes instead. She loved to collect baseball cards, and she still loved riding her bike around the neighborhood and even pushing her little red wagon behind her sometimes. Despite being a straight A student with plenty of friends, Jennifer wasn't one to seek attention. Her innocence and purity were things she took pride in. She wasn't rebellious, she was never in trouble, and having her ears double pierced was probably the craziest thing she did. She adored her family, and she loved watching Beverly Hills 90210. I did too. And Jennifer had a particular fondness for wearing this watch that her parents gave her that had Goofy on it. The night Jennifer went missing, her mother, Sandra, felt safe letting her go out with her friends. It was a Saturday night, and Jennifer was excited about the evening. Her parents had given her a pager. This was a gift, and they gave it to her so that she had the freedom to communicate if she needed help or if she needed a ride home. Sandra dropped Jennifer off at her best friend Elizabeth Pena's house. Her house was about 4.5 miles away. The mother and daughter shared their usual goodbye, a loving hug, and I love you. Jennifer's curfew was midnight, and they both knew she would be safe, as she always was. At that moment, Sandra had no reason to believe that this night would be any different from the others. Elizabeth Pena, born June 21st, 1977, was a girl with a warm, loving nature. Elizabeth had such a bond with her dad, and she had a carefree spirit. Elizabeth was the kind of girl who loved dressing up, swimming, and playing with her little sister Rachel. She was popular and gorgeous. Truly a girly girl. She attended a private Catholic school. Although she was a decent student, she never really pushed for honor roll status and had an attitude of doing what she needed just to get by. But at 14, Elizabeth began to hang out with the wrong crowd. Her father, Adolfo, described this group of kids as lifeless kids, those who didn't seem to have much direction or purpose in their lives. Still, Elizabeth wasn't into drugs or trouble. She just found herself in a phase of teenage rebellion. But when Elizabeth met Jennifer, everything seemed to change. Her behavior improved, her grades got better, the girls were inseparable, and Jennifer, according to Adolfo, was a positive influence on his daughter. He admired how polite and respectful Jennifer was. The friendship seemed to pull Elizabeth back from the edge, giving her the solid foundation and sense of direction that she had been craving. Elizabeth had just finished 9th grade at Waltrip High School, and her relationship with Jennifer was flourishing. Elizabeth had even started dating a boy, something that seemed to be marking a shift in her life. She was beginning to find balance again with Jennifer by her side. Elizabeth's father, Adolfo, recalls driving the family back from a vacation in Florida. The kids were in the back seat. Elizabeth had a younger brother and sister. The kids just had the greatest vacation. They're kind of laughing and chatting and just reminiscing about how much fun they had. And Adolfo recalls just glancing at them in the rearview mirror and thinking, man, what would happen if I didn't have these kids? And this was just a thought that passed through his mind, just a moment of reflection. But this thought would haunt him later when he realized that he had lost his daughter. These two girls, they were vibrant, full of life. They would become victims of an unspeakable act of violence. On Thursday, June 24th, 1993, this evening started like any other summer night, full of excitement, anticipation. It was 8 p.m., and Melissa Pena was watching her daughter Elizabeth and her best friend Jennifer Ertman get ready for a night out. The two girls were thrilled for their upcoming hangout at their friend Gina's apartment. Gina was just going to host a small get-together. So Melissa, Elizabeth's mom, drives the girls to this event, waving at them with a smile and a final reminder to be home by curfew. The girls were looking forward to a fun night of laughter and relaxation, unaware this is about to turn into a nightmare. Once at Gina's apartment, the three girls, they settle in, they go to Gina's bedroom, they're chatting, enjoying each other's company. As the evening wore on, Jennifer's pager buzzed, and this is a signal that her mom was just checking in on her. So Jennifer, being the responsible daughter that she was, immediately calls her mom back. It was routine. It was just comfort for her mom. And Jennifer made sure to keep her parents in the loop about her whereabouts at all times. After this quick check-in, Jennifer and her friends decided to head outside, just hang outside in the courtyard for probably the next 90 minutes. It's at this point that Gina's boyfriend gives them a call, and he wants to come hang out, and he suggests that maybe they all go over to an apartment complex that has a pool. So they head over to this apartment complex and they meet up with a couple more friends. This is where they will all hang out for the rest of the evening until Jennifer and Elizabeth have to get home before their curfew. Meanwhile, not far away, another group of teens was also gearing up for their own evening. First up, Frank and Ramon Sandoval were twin brothers preparing for a hangout at Peter Cantu's house. Frank, a ninth grade dropout who worked at a local hot dog stand, lived with his parents and twin brother Ramon. The two brothers are very close, and Ramon had only recently introduced his twin to Peter Cantu, who lived next door. Over time, Ramon became fast friends with Peter, and Frank soon found himself hanging out with the group. Joe Medellin, who lived on the opposite side of Peter's house, was also part of this growing circle. Frank, despite his sometimes uneasy relationship with the group, was drawn into the tight-knit camaraderie of the four boys: Peter, Joe, Sean, and Ramon. Now, those four boys are already tight, but Frank is just trying to hang out, see if he cares to even be a part of this group. So he says, yeah, what the hell, I'll come out with you guys tonight, Ramon. This group of teenage boys was tight. They bonded over their rebellious behavior. And let me tell you something, I'm going to give you some background on each of these boys. And man, it is tiring just rattling off all the shit they did as teenagers. These boys even decided to get matching tattoos, a cross with their names etched across it. This was a symbol of their loyalty to one another, and they did the tattoos themselves. So right now we have Peter Cantu, Joe Medellin, Ramon Sandoval, Frank Sandoval, and Sean O'Brien. On this particular night, Joe Medellin is going to bring along his younger brother at only age 14, Uni Medellin. Will be joining the group tonight for the very first time. We're also going to have Efrain Perez Jr. and his friend Raul Villarreal. So let's get started. Here comes some background on each of these boys, and let me tell you, you are going to be pissed off when you see that they were never held accountable for a damn thing that they ever did. The book Pure Murder goes real deep and real hard into the background of these boys, but I'm not going to do that much because fuck them. Okay, Raul Villarreal. We're going to start with him first because he is new to the group. He desperately wants to be a part of this gang, and they're not really a gang. They kind of find it amusing that Raul thinks that they are this gang called the Black and White Gang, when in reality, they're just a tight-knit group of neighborhood friends. Raul Villarreal was born on September 25th, 1975 in Houston, Texas. He is a 17-year-old middle school dropout, unemployed, lives with his parents. They live in a quaint house in a poor neighborhood. And the family always needed money, but Raul never helped out. He is the third child between twin sisters Laura and Elizabeth. So Raul had a rough upbringing. His family, led by his father Omar Villarreal, he worked hard to provide for the children, but Raul was a troubled teenager. He was a follower. He found comfort in his relationship with Efrain Perez, and Efrain was also from a very difficult background. He had been in and out of trouble, including multiple instances of stealing cars and involvement in very violent incidents. These two boys, despite their issues with authority, they found a bond, and that bond led them down a dangerous path. Raul's mother, Luisa, had always tried to steer him away from negative influences, but despite her best efforts, Raul just couldn't stay away from trouble. And this was really hard on his mom because she really had a strong emphasis on church and education and sports. I mean, the family attended church together every week. She tried to keep her children well-fed and clean and obedient, but Raul, even from an early age, just struggled. He struggled socially. He struggled in school. He was held back twice. He was unable to keep up with his peers. And by the time he was 15, he made the decision to drop out of middle school. His parents, particularly his mom, were devastated. They hoped for better for him, but Raul didn't see the point in continuing on with school. He just felt disconnected, and he was often made fun of in school for his old clothes. He was bullied quite a bit. So instead of focusing on academics, Raul would spend much of his time with his cousin Eddie, and he was content with the small paychecks that he was earning from his part-time jobs instead of going to school. Raul was convinced that finishing school just was not necessary. And although he had the chance to follow in his family's footsteps by joining a nursing program with his mothers and sisters, he struggled with his sense of worth. Raul graduated from this 4-month nursing program in January 1993, and he earned his nursing certificate. But despite all this hard work, Raul could not land a job. His mother and sisters all found employment in the nursing field, and Raul couldn't get any interviews. He couldn't get hired, so this left him feeling rejected, unwanted. He was depressed and isolated. So he sought out a new sense of belonging, and this is what led him to Efrain Perez. And this was a young man who was already well established in a troubled group of friends. And now this relationship between Efrain and Raul is going to alter the course of Raul's life forever. Efrain Perez Jr. was born on November 19th, 1975 to Maria Luis Lopez and Leo Guerrero in a small, modest home in Houston, Texas. Efrain's early life was filled with instability as his parents separated when he was young, leaving him and his sister Gabriela in the care of their grandmother for much of their childhood. The Perez family moved frequently from Houston to Brownsville and back again. As Efrain's mother sought better job opportunities, these moves were not very comfortable for Efrain. Throughout these moves, he decided to stay at his grandmother's house. So instead of moving back and forth, now Efrain is going to live with his grandmother, and this is where he was taught good manners. He had a curfew. He thrived. He was thriving in school, and he had a stable environment. As a child, Efrain was well-behaved and a great student. He excelled in school. He even joined the school band. His teachers praised him for his discipline and focus, but by the time he reached his teenage years, things began to change. In the 8th grade, after moving back to Houston again, Efrain started to get into trouble. He met a new group of friends, and this group included Peter Cantu and Joe Medellin. With these new friends, he began skipping school and getting into way more fights. His behavior shifted from being a model student to someone who was increasingly drawn to the streets. Despite his mother's attempts to keep him on track, Ephraim's rebellious streak continued to grow. In December 1991, Ephraim found himself involved in his first legal trouble when he was arrested for stealing a van in the north side of Houston. And though he showed little emotion during his arrest, Ephraim's nonchalant demeanor became a telling sign of his growing indifference to the consequences of his actions. A few weeks later, he was caught attempting to steal another car, but this time he wasn't charged either. Neither time. Didn't get charged. And despite his growing criminal activity, he was placed on probation and given strict rules, including mandatory counseling and drug testing, though he rarely ever went to these. He did not comply. He did not even take it seriously one bit. Now, when Ephraim lived with his grandmother and his aunt Doria, he was a good kid. He was on the right track. They begged his mother not to make him move back to Houston. They wanted to keep him in Brownsville. But he went back to Houston, and this is where he met Joe Medellin, as I said. And Joe Medellin was his number one guy when they were involved in stealing these cars. One such car theft was on June 4th, 1992. Kathleen and Greg Buford, they're watching their nephew in this bowling competition in town. They're at the bowling alley having a great day. Around noon, Greg goes out to his car in the parking lot, and he can't find his car. It's gone. Guess who took it? Efren Perez, Joe Medellin, and Peter Cantu stole this car out of the bowling alley parking lot, and they just take it all around town. They stop at their favorite taco restaurant. They go inside, they sit down in a booth, and they just eat. The ball's on these teenagers. So this is why I wanted to tell you this story about them. They're sitting in this restaurant, and it just so happens that Kathleen, who had her car stolen earlier, she sees this car in the parking lot as she's just driving by with her sister. So she calls her husband, Greg. He calls the police, and the police come and find these three boys just standing against the car in the parking lot, hanging out. One of them's got a gun in his pocket of his jeans, but these boys are just standing there like, this is our car. What are you going to do about it? But once the police show up, the boys take off. They all try to run. One boy gets away. Peter Cantu. But Joe and Ephraim are caught. And now they are sent to juvenile division. On February 5th, 1991, Ephraim Perez is in juvie court for the car theft. The judge says he should be placed in his mom's custody, put on probation, and he must attend a juvenile alcohol and drug program. He must also attend a peer pressure workshop. He must have no contact with Joe Medellin. The additional rules were he is to report to a juvenile division officer. If he ever moves from his current address, he must attend school every day. He must stay within the county. He must not violate any laws. He must not leave his mom's home. He must be home every evening by 9 p.m. He must not operate a motor vehicle. He is not allowed to have a driver's license. He must take a drug test. And do you think that he did any one of these fucking things? No. Ephraim Perez had no home phone, no landline in the 90s in this house, so no one was ever able to check up on him. No one ever answered the door when somebody from the court would come to the door. The court would send letters. His probation officer tried to drop in every now and then, and no one was ever home. So she sent a letter asking Ephraim Perez to come to her office. He did, and the family went one time to her office to meet her for counseling sessions, and then that was it. They never went again. And this probation officer claimed that what is she supposed to do? She never reported any of this because what is she going to do? I mean, here's an example. So one of the mandatory rules was that Joe and Ephraim were never supposed to hang out at all, ever. But Joe and Ephraim would walk into this probation officer's office together. They continued to be friends. And she would go on to say, it wasn't enough for me to take it back to court. So basically, her method of monitoring his case was to call his home and ask, hey, are you home? You are? Cool. Okay. But even that, Efren didn't have a phone, so she couldn't even do that. Okay. Long story short, no one cared. No one had control over this boy, and no one kept a watchful eye over him at all. And with no one watching over these boys, let's hear about some other things they did. So February 8th, 1992, a young man named Gary Ford, he is an avid football collector, baseball card collector. He works at a place called Trader's Village. Now, this is a large flea market where he would sell football and baseball cards to make some extra money. He made so much money once that he bought himself his most prized possession. It was a black LA Raiders jacket. On this day, Gary Ford is walking to the flea market, to make money, to be a good member of society. He's wearing his black LA Raiders jacket, a pair of red and maroon Air Jordans. He's got a box of football cards underneath his arm. He carried a steak knife for protection. And this is because Gary Ford was not a popular guy in town with the local gangs in this neighborhood, because Gary would tell little kids, never join a gang. Gangs are not cool. He was not popular with these guys. So this particular day, as he walked, Gary sees a teenage boy coming towards him. He didn't know him. The boy crosses Gary. They keep walking past each other, but then the boy stops and turns around. He looks back at Gary Ford and he asks him, hey, are you a part of the Latin Kings? And Gary Ford says, hell no. And then with that, this boy says to Gary Ford, I want your jacket. And Gary's like, what? No, this is my favorite thing in the world. I worked hard for this. I'm not giving up this jacket. And then the boy shows his gun. And the boy says, well, that's fine. I'll just take the fucking jacket. This boy tells Gary, do not do anything stupid. I know where you live and I'll shoot your mom. Hearing this, Gary calms down a little bit, tries to assess the situation, and that is when this boy says, I will rape and kill your mom. So Gary takes off his jacket and he's like, dude, calm down. Like, what the fuck? As he's taking off his jacket, he decides, I'm going to throw this jacket up in the air and I am going to run my ass off. As he tries to do that, this boy charges at Gary and tackles him. And in this tackle, the gun falls out of the boy's pocket. It's at this time that a maroon car pulls up with a bunch of guys in it, and these guys jump out. Gary's so confused. He's like, oh shit. So now this kid has like a gang of guys after me. So Gary just takes off running. And as he's running, he hears these popping sounds. And as he hears the popping sounds, he falls down. And as he's laying on the ground, he looks up and he sees this group of men, boys, running towards him. But these boys are not there to hurt him. These boys are there to help him. They told him, yo, dude, you've been shot. Gary was shot in the chest and in the shoulder blade. This neighborhood of people, they are so good. They start running towards Gary. People are coming out of their houses. These boys that pulled up in the car are running up to help Gary. More than 100 people are running to help Gary. Gary Ford is taken away in a life flight helicopter. The doctors found bullets, but they couldn't remove them. Gary Ford had to live with these bullets inside of him, and he did not know who the hell this person was that just bombarded him on the street with all this bullshit. And guess who it was? It was Efrain Perez. But Gary didn't know Efrain Perez, and Efrain Perez was never caught for this attempted murder on Gary Ford. By the spring of 1992, Efrain is expelled from school. He tries to go back to school again in September 1992, but he's immediately in trouble again, fighting with rival gangs, getting expelled from school. He is put on home-based instruction, but of course, he doesn't comply with it. His parents don't give a shit. He drops out. And his probation officer says again, oh, sorry, I had my hands tied. Nobody has any idea that this child has already tried to kill someone, another teenager. You know what else they don't know? They don't know that on December 4th, 1992, 36-year-old Jose Arellano drove all the way from Fresno, California to Houston, Texas to attend his cousin's wedding. His cousin's name was Jose Acosta. These two loved spending time with each other. They were so excited to see each other. They had another cousin named Jose Arellano Acosta. Now, Jose Arellano, who drove from California, he doesn't speak English. After the wedding, these cousins all get together and they're hanging out in the courtyard of the apartment complex where the married couple lives. And as they're standing out there just chit-chatting and hanging out, this group of boys walks towards them. And the group of boys says, "Give me your money." Jose Arellano does not understand what they are saying. He's, I'm sorry, I don't speak English. He's dumbfounded by this. One of the boys pulls out a gun and Jose Arellano puts his hands up to protect himself. And it's immediate at this time that this boy shoots Jose Arellano in the chest. But the bullet hits his arm. And as the bullet hits Jose Arellano's arm, he rolls to the ground to try to escape. He rolls under a vehicle that is parked nearby. But as he's rolling, a third boy comes at him. Jose is shot again, this time in the shoulder blades. Jose Arellano passes out, but he hears a third shot. Efrain Perez shot and killed Jose Arellano's cousin, Jose Arellano Acosta. The three boys ran. They never got any money, and they were never charged. Those three boys, of course, were Joe Medellin, Efrain Perez, and Raul Villarreal. So let's get to know Joe Medellin a little bit better. Jose Ernesto Medellin goes by Joe, born on March 4th, 1975, in Mexico. His mother, Maria, was only 15 when she gave birth to Joe. 2 years later, Venancio Jr. was born. Now, Venancio Ernesto Medellin is Uni, Joe's younger brother, who is age 14, so he goes by Uni. When they were younger kids, they never got into any trouble. Early childhood was Joe's favorite time of his life. He was an excellent student. He won third place in a science fair, even visited NASA, went to the Museum of Natural Science with his teachers as a special trip because he was such a good student. Honor student, he ranked top in his elementary class. Joe started to become very different in 5th and 6th grade. He was suspended from school, and then he was sent to an alternative school and then expelled from the entire school district. Joe followed his own rules. He gets into fights with teachers, with other students. He's constantly telling people, "I'll kill you," blah, blah, blah. He one time was quoted as saying, "Yeah, I could go to jail, man. Jail don't mean nothing to me. Next time you see me, I'll be famous, probably because I killed somebody." Awesome. Cool. Joe would always claim that his goal was to earn his GED and then head back to Mexico and join the military, but he never did that. Joe worked at a concrete company and he was always at work. That guy worked a lot. He worked from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. He would make $35 a day and he would give half of his paycheck to his parents. But Joe is on the same path as all of his friends. He is stealing cars every night, joyriding in stolen cars, telling people he's going to kill them, doesn't give a shit about anything but himself and his friends. Okay, we're almost through all of these shitheads, so let's go. Now we have Peter Cantu. Peter Cantu is born May 27th, 1975 to Susie and Rudolph Cantu. Peter is the third boy after older brothers Rudy and Joe, and then he has a younger sister named Sabrina. Susie was born and raised in Austin and met Rudy Sr. when she was only 15. So Peter's mom meets her dad when she's 15. She had only made it through 10th grade, started this family, and this was a loving family. They had a really close bond. Peter loved spending time with his grandfather. His mom, Susie, says that Peter was a good kid. He had poor speaking skills as a child, and he went to speech therapy. Peter noticed that he would get frustrated when he spoke because his words would get all jumbled. And because of this, he was bullied because of his speech problems. Never a good student, but he excelled with math. In second grade, he was far behind most kids. In third grade, he had all D's in every subject, and this caused Peter to become depressed. Then, to make matters worse, Peter's grandfather dies. Peter was so depressed, but his mom recalls that he never cried. Susie Cantu says that Peter's granddad was laid to rest on Peter's birthday, and this was something that would affect him for the rest of his life. Peter would cry to his mom and claim that one of his teachers was always poking him in the shoulder and pushing him. And if there's something you got to know about Peter's mom, it's that Peter's mom does not think that Peter can do anything wrong. Peter is a little angel. Oh, not my baby. My boy wouldn't do that. So she goes down to the school and she is just losing her shit on the principal and the teachers. Like, don't touch my kid. Don't fucking touch my kid. And the teachers are like, what are you talking about? Nobody's touching your kid, lady. Peter had to repeat the third grade. He actually ended up repeating 2 grades before hitting junior high. So let's say he was 11 when he was in a class of 9-year-olds. When he hit 4th grade, he tried to be better. He was trying for a little bit, but come June 24th, 1986, there is a boy named Darren McElroy in Peter's school. Now they all leave school. Darren McElroy decides he's going to go down to the local 7-Eleven and play some video games. And when he did, he left his bike outside. Now this bike is Darren's prized possession because he won it in a contest. So the contest was a muscular dystrophy contest to raise money, and Darren was really proud that he won because his brother had muscular dystrophy. So this bike was so special to him. So he rides his bike, he leaves it outside, he comes out of the 7-Eleven, and as he's leaving, he notices that 2 older boys are now behind him. Darren's getting a little scared. He's only 8 years old. He sees these older boys running at him and they caught him. They push him off his bike. They push him into a ditch. They grab his bike. They swing it in the air and then they laugh, running off with Darren's bike. Darren is hysterical, scared, walks home. He gets home and I'm telling you, his mom loses her shit because her son, 8 years old, is crying. So Darren's mom goes back to the 7-Eleven and she offers these other teenage boys that are standing around, she offers them $10 to help her find that bike. And do you know what happens? Fucking Peter Cantu shows up to Darren's house with the bike, tells the mom that he found the bike. She's like, oh my God, thank you so much for helping. And he's like, yeah, can I get that $10? Peter Cantu stole the bike. Obviously, I know you guys already know that, but the mom puts the bike in the garage and 2 days later, it is stolen again and never seen again. Oh, you're going to get real tired of me telling you all the shit that Peter does, but here we go. In 1988, Peter flunks out of school for excessive absences. He gets in trouble again because he met a girl named Amber Law. Amber Law used to walk home with a group of friends after school, and Peter would sometimes join them. Now, one day in 1988, when Peter walked Amber home, he walked her up to her door. And as he gets her to her door, he leans in and he tries to kiss her, but Amber's like, hell no. She's like, Peter, we're just friends. And then Peter leaves. But Peter wanted Amber, so he returned to her house, banging on the door. Amber wouldn't answer. Peter is screaming, let me in. Amber is scared as fuck. He says, you better let me in, you bitch. Peter starts circling the home of Amber, bangs on every door, every window. He even banged so hard that he shattered Amber's dad's bedroom window. Amber's on the phone calling her dad. She's hysterical, crying, Dad, come home. This kid is creeping me out. Amber's dad rushes home. He gets home, finds out who this kid is, and goes straight to Peter Cantu's house. And of course, Peter's mom says, no, not my Peter. No, he's not that kind of boy. She just stood there defending Peter, and she refused to believe anything that Amber's dad was saying. But Amber's dad gets in Peter's face, and he's like, you never come to my fucking house. Do you understand me? And Peter says, I don't have to do what you tell me. I can do whatever I want. And his mom just sits there silent. Amber's dad calls the police, reports the incident, and now an officer goes to Peter's house and tells Peter to stay away from Amber. But Peter doesn't care. Again, nothing is done. Ready for another one? November 17th, 1988, Peter Cantu is in trouble again in school. He is standing in a school hallway, staring down another student, a little stare down, if you will. The students are gathering for this fight, and a teacher notices it. So this teacher comes out of her classroom, and she's like, yo, let's chill, guys, stop the fight. Peter ignores her. So the teacher grabs him by the back of his coat, just kind of to like bring him into the classroom, and Peter turns around, grabs her hands, and pushes her. This teacher is shocked. The whole classroom is shocked, but Peter keeps pushing her harder and harder. He knocks her down, but she doesn't fall. And then he keeps pushing and pushing and pushing until she falls. He's yelling, "Get out of my way, old lady." He grabs her again and keeps pushing. The teacher gets the students to push the panic button, but Peter doesn't stop. He's still attacking her. So he's holding her while she's also yelling, "Let go of me, get off of me." The students are freaking out. They're begging other teachers for help. So a male teacher comes in and helps. This time, Peter was arrested and charged, and oh my God, say it with me, he was let go. Back in school by January 1999 and still harassing this teacher. He was never in that teacher's room again, but he made it his life goal to make this teacher's life a living hell, tormenting her whenever he could. This teacher ends up obviously leaving this school. And Peter rained terror on that entire school. Things just kept getting worse and worse. And of course, his mom was just enabling him. Now, the anger inside of this child, it's just unbelievable. Now, that fight I just described happened in November of 1988. But by October of 1989, a whole year later, Peter is at a football game. And he sees the daughter of the teacher that tried to stop him from fighting that day. This daughter was named Alicia. So they're at this middle school football game. We're in middle school, guys. 11-year-old Alicia is going to the concession stand to get something to eat. And while she's standing there, Peter and his friends come up behind her and whisper in her ear, "I'm going to kill your father." This little girl turns around. She's like, "What?" He says it again. "I can't believe your asshole of a father grabbed me and threw me to the ground like that." Okay, so this kid is a fucking menace, okay? So he just keeps yelling at this 11-year-old kid. Peter asks Alicia, "Is your dad here?" Alicia lies and says no, and some other students tell her that she should be scared because Peter and his friends have a gun. So she tells her dad right away, and Peter is escorted out of the football game. But the next day, Peter is brought into the principal's office, and I'm not even going to describe the whole scene, but Peter cursed so much at the staff, the teachers. He was yelling the N-word over and over, yelling at the principal, calling her a bitch. They end up putting handcuffs on him, and he's still yelling, "I'll kill you, you piece of shit, N-word." I mean, it goes on forever. Police are called. He's placed under arrest. Peter tries to lunge at security guards. Again, expelled, kicked out of school. Nothing's done. I mean, honestly, reading about Peter was so exhausting. Okay, so next up, Derek Sean O'Brien, who goes by Sean, born April 4th, 1975, to a 19-year-old mother named Ella. So Sean's father's never in the picture. His mom ends up meeting a man named Harold Jones. Harold Jones asks Ella to move in, but says, "You cannot bring your son." So Ella leaves her son with her mom. So Sean is now raised by his grandma, and he seems very well adjusted. This grandma didn't believe in discipline or chores, and so Sean started acting out at age 4. Sean began drinking at age 5. Age 5. Sean failed first grade, obviously, because he's drunk all the time. He's placed in a special education class. Sean is your typical future serial killer who tortures animals. And one time, Sean was playing in his grandmother's bedroom. He was climbing up on her drawer, this really big, heavy dresser. He's climbing up on it, and he ends up breaking one of the bottom drawers. His grandmother decides, okay, I'll fix this myself. And in the process of fixing the dresser, it falls on top of her, hitting her head so hard she is knocked out cold, unconscious. Grandma is rushed to the hospital with a traumatic brain injury. This impact on her brain was so substantial that she couldn't raise Sean anymore. So Sean now moves back in with his mother and his stepfather, who never ever wanted him in the first place. And he now has a half sister. And in moving back, Sean now has rules. He had to answer to this stepfather. So he's not getting any attention from his mom. The only attention he's getting from his stepfather is just anger. So Sean ends up resenting everyone. He resents his mom, his stepfather, and his half sister because why did I get sent away, but they have you and you get all the attention now? So by the time he's in 5th grade, Sean has tried to kill himself by swallowing a bottle of Tylenol. And this is going to be the first of several suicide attempts by Sean. Therapists would say that these were legitimate attempts. At age 10, Ella took her son to a center for help, and they did not end up helping. By January 1987, Ella divorces Harold because he wasn't treating Sean the way that she would like him to be treated. So good on Ella at this point. They do end up leaving Harold's house, and Ella, Sean, and his little sister all move back in with Sean's grandmother. So he's happy again. He's excited. He's back with mom. But it didn't take long until Sean tries to slice his arms open with a razor blade in an attempt to take his own life. Again and again, Ella, Sean's mom, will take him to a psychologist. She is trying so hard to get help for her son, but no one is listening. Sean's mom now ends up having another baby, a son. Of course, Sean is upset about this because, again, the attention is taken away from Sean. He keeps fighting at school. He's bullying smaller kids. He bullied this little boy for his shoes. And this little boy was so scared of Sean. I'm talking a little boy. He asked the teacher, will you please ride the school bus home with me because I am scared to death of Sean O'Brien. And this teacher's like, hell yeah, I'll get on that bus with you. She gets on that bus with that little boy, and Sean doesn't give a shit. He's going to still bully this little boy. In fact, Sean takes a tennis shoe and whips it at the highest speed possible at the back of this little boy's head, ends up hitting the little boy. And in the process, the teacher stands up to yell, and Sean tackles the teacher, a female, to the ground on this bus. And this female teacher is like, no, I'm fighting back. So she's trying to fight back, and it's not working. Sean is going crazy on her. Sean ends up getting expelled, of course, for this fight with the teacher. I mean, this is middle school, by the way. Honestly, I could go on and on for days about things Sean did, so let me just ramble these off real quick for you. Sean does try to kill himself at least 3 more times. Sean fondles a girl's breast on the bus against her will. Sean attempts to choke a student on the bus. Sean fights with his mother and punches her straight in the face so hard that she falls through a glass window. Has to go to the hospital, and Sean laughed. Sean also missed 65 days of school in 1991 and 125 days for the whole year, so he dropped out of school. Sean ran away from home 4 times in 6 months. Sean was considered a compulsive liar by a therapist. Sean had so many issues with his mom, mainly the fact that in the beginning of his life, she rejected him and sent him away. Then she went on to have more kids that, in his words, she loved more. So let me take you back to the night of June 24th, 1993. We are at the Sandoval residence, where Ramon and Frank Sandoval, the twin brothers, are invited over to neighbor and BFF Peter Cantu's house for a special hang for the evening. It is around 9:15 p.m. Peter, Raul, Uni, Joe, Efrain, and the Sandovals are going to go down to the convenience store to buy some malt liquor. Tonight is going to be a very special night because Raul is meeting the gang for the first time. And now Raul wants to join this gang, but the boys are all laughing at him because Raul really thinks that this is a, quote, gang, but it's not. But these boys aren't going to let him know that. They're kind of like, let's fuck with this dude. Peter is like, yo, let's fight Raul. Like, let's tell him that the only way he can get into the gang is if he fights each and every one of us, and he can't be knocked out. So the only way he can enter the black and white gang is if he fights us all, he stays standing after fighting 7 people. And Raul is like fucking stoked for this for some reason. He's like, oh my God, yes, I could do this. Listen, I'm a big guy. I can take care of all of you, and I will show you. If you let me into this gang, yo, I got your backs forever, and I'm going to show you that I'm a fighter. So these boys are like, okay, this sounds super fun. So they go get some malt liquor, and they're going to go down to the park near their house, and they're going to just have a big old brawl. But first, they got to pick up Sean O'Brien. So let's get this Raul fight started. Raul is going to fight Ramon Sandoval first. Now the rules are that each boy is going to fight Raul for 5 minutes. Raul must remain standing at the end of the fight. And after fighting 7 teenage boys, Raul can join the gang. They will form a human circle surrounding whoever is fighting. And these are some rough fights. I'm talking hard punching. Hard punches to the face, chokeholds. Ramon's up first, and Raul is getting the better of Ramon. Raul is proving himself to be a man of his word. He is a fighter. Next up is Joe Medellin. Joe is a little more powerful, and Joe kind of pummeled Raul, but he couldn't knock him out. He only wore him down. Raul wins this fight. Next up, Frank Sandoval. But Frank Sandoval says, no. Peter is trying to push Frank Sandoval. And now remember, Frank is the one that didn't even really want to be here in the first place. He doesn't really like his brother's friends, but he just wanted to hang with his brother. And Frank stands up for himself. Frank's like, no, I don't want to fight him, so I'm not doing it, dude. So next up, Sean O'Brien. Sean gets to fight third, so he's taking advantage of Raul's weakness, and he does land several punches straight to Raul's face. But whenever Raul lands a punch to Sean, Sean just yells, I like that. I like that. And then Sean ends up hitting Raul with an uppercut straight to the chin, and Raul falls. But he gets back up, and now Peter steps in. And it's supposed to be Peter's turn to fight, but Peter sees that Raul is knocked out and moaning, so he calls it. He calls the fight. He says, we're done. You didn't last, Peter. You didn't make it past all 7 of us. You got knocked the fuck out. So Peter says, get up, get off your ass. You failed. Peter tells the group, what are we going to do with him? And all the guys are like, whatever, man, he kind of fought pretty hard. Let's let him join the gang. We were just kind of kidding around anyway. So they all cheer and they say, yay, you're in. Dude, you're a badass. And Raul smiles and he's so excited because he's in the black and white gang. Okay, so all of these teen boys get really amped up, men. They all pop open a beer. They all stand around talking about how much they will always have each other's backs. They will always stand up for each other. They will never let anyone put them down. And Raul says, man, this is gonna be fun. Meanwhile, the girls, Jennifer and Elizabeth and their friends, they're hanging out at the pool. They're having a great time. And at around 10:20 p.m., Jennifer tells Elizabeth that they need to leave. They got to get home for curfew. They got an 11 o'clock curfew, but they all get caught up talking. You know how it is. And they don't realize that at this point, 10 minutes passes. They have an 11 p.m. curfew, and it would take 30 minutes to walk home. So technically, they're going to be late right now. Elizabeth's friend, Vanessa, then pages her, so Elizabeth goes to a phone to call Vanessa back, which wastes so much time. It wastes about another 10 minutes, and now Jennifer is getting nervous because Jennifer has never missed curfew before. She doesn't want to be late, so these girls decide the best idea would be to take a shortcut through the park. This shortcut through TC Jester Park is going to save the girls 10 minutes of walking time. Meanwhile, there are 8 teenage boys, drunk, celebrating, and ready to fight. Jennifer and Elizabeth are unaware that they are on the verge of crossing paths with evil. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Residue, and oh my goodness, I am so sorry that I did not tell you in the beginning that this is going to be a two-parter. This was part 1, and you're going to have to come back again for part 2. Thank you for listening. You know that I adore the hell out of every single one of you, and I appreciate you coming back and listening every single week to my little podcast. You guys all rule. And if you don't already follow me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, just go do it. It's Residue Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for following the show. I cannot wait to see you again very soon. And I hope that you all stay safe and stay paranoid.